Welcome to True Crime Expert, where we examine some of the nation's most horrifying and intricate cases. In today's episode, a wedding that starts out as a happy event turns tragic. Unimaginable facts that would completely shock her family and friends were exposed by the murder of a young bride. This is the tale of a husband and his best man having a covert homosexual romance. And how murder was the result of it all. The 27-year-old nurse Laura McGregor was renowned for her warmth and contagious grin. She was reared in Medford, Oregon, and had always hoped to have a successful profession and a family. Laura was a charming individual who made friends everywhere she went and was incredibly devoted to her family. Shane Riley, her cousin who would eventually be the best man at her wedding, was particularly close to her. Laura attended the University of Oregon to obtain a nursing degree because she was passionate about helping people. She returned to Medford after graduating and took a job at a nearby hospital. Laura and Bryce McGregor met at a party hosted by mutual friends in 2008. At the age of 30, Bryce operated a modest marketing firm. He seemed ideal for Laura and was polite and self-assured. They immediately became friends since they had similar hobbies, such as watching Netflix movies and hiking in the Oregon woods. Wright seemed like the perfect companion because of his thriving business and sophisticated appearance. Laura felt deeply in love with him, seeing a happy and loving future. During a romantic meal at Forder's Dining at the Depot, one of Medford's best restaurants, Wrights proposed to Laura in 2010. It was a joyful and exciting evening. Laura was eager to begin her life with Bryce. She devoted months to organizing their ideal wedding, making sure that every tiny detail reflected her individuality. Her favorite band, Maroon 5, was playing on the playlist for their first dance, along with exquisite floral arrangements and a designer clothing. Laura's wedding day at the nearby Hilton Garden Inn in late June 2011 was perfect. Happily oblivious to the sinister mysteries that lay beneath the surface, she stood at the altar. Laura was unaware that Bryce had been leading two separate lives. He had been having covert encounters with guys he met online for years, keeping his sexual orientation a secret from her. Bryce was under a lot of pressure to keep everything secret, and his secret existence was becoming out of control. Laura was totally oblivious to the fact that her marriage to Bryce was based on deception. She had no idea that some of her closest friends and family, who had supported her on her wedding day, were also Bryce's lovers. Like any bride, Laura was both anxious and excited in the days leading up to her wedding. Making last-minute arrangements and anticipating her honeymoon, she spent time with her family. But there was a web of deceit hidden behind her happiness. Secrets that were about to be revealed. Resulting in her vicious murder a few hours after she said, "I do." A cleaning staff member at the Hilton Garden Inn in Medford, Oregon, discovered a gory find on the morning of June 26, 2011, the day after Laura and Bryce McGregor's wedding. Maria Gonzalez, a staff member, arrived at the honeymoon suite shortly after 9:30 a.m. to clean it, anticipating an empty room because the newlyweds were due to check out. Rather, she discovered Laura McGregor's corpse in the restroom. Laura had been brutally assaulted. Her body lay crumpled on the white tile floor, surrounded by blood splatter. Her death via pistol whipping was later verified by investigators. She sustained serious head injuries and numerous cuts, which suggested a violent battle. Once brimming with happiness on their wedding day, the immaculate honeymoon suite was now a horrific crime scene. Maria hurried out of the room, clearly shocked and afraid by what she saw, and informed the hotel management, who promptly dialed the police. Within 15 minutes, officers were on the scene, securing the area and sealing off the hallway. It was evident that this was not a heist gone wrong as detectives settled down in the suite. None of their possessions had been stolen, and Laura's jewelry, including her wedding band and diamond engagement ring, was still on her body. The attack's savagery suggested something far more intimate. At first look, the murder weapon seemed to be a small revolver that had been dumped close to the scene and had been cleaned of fingerprints. After gathering the hotel's security footage, authorities started questioning both employees and visitors. However, the start of a convoluted investigation would ultimately be Maria's finding of Laura's body. One that would reveal Laura's life's dark secrets and unspoken betrayals. Secrets that would be revealed soon. Bryce McGregor was not there at the Hilton Garden Inn when police came after Laura McGregor's body was recovered. Hours later, he was found sitting by himself in a local coffee shop, clearly shaken. During the police interrogation, Bryce provided an odd and concerning account. He said that a man named Jake, who was 7 feet tall, had broken into their honeymoon suite the night of the murder. This man was Laura's drug supplier, Bryce said. Laura had been covertly addicted to opiates for years, according to Bryce. And that Jake had attacked her because he was angry about a debt. According to Bryce, the intruder bound him to a chair and had him witness Laura's terrible beating death. Red flags were immediately raised by Bryce's story. No proof of a break-in at the Huntington suite had been discovered by investigators, and Bryce displayed no signs of having been restrained or injured during the alleged attack. Police were dubious of Bryce's claims that Laura had been concealing a drug problem. They started interviewing Laura's friends, family, and co-workers in order to learn more about her personal background. According to Laura's hospital co-workers, she is a committed nurse who exhibits no indicators of abnormal behavior. Additionally, her toxicology testing came back clean, and her medical records showed no history of drug usage. When she passed away, she had no drugs in her system. Additionally, Laura's cell phone, suitcase, and purse were searched by investigators. No indication of drug use, covert encounters with traffickers, or a secret Gill stockpile was discovered. Despite its drama, Bryce's story was rapidly unraveling. Police discovered no witnesses or video footage to support the allegation that someone had entered their room that night, and the description of the alleged drug dealer, a tall man called Jake, seemed unlikely. Police turned their focus back on Bryce as their main suspect because of the contradictions in his story and the absence of any tangible proof to support his statements. Since there were no indications of forced entrance or a battle with an outsider at the murder site, authorities concluded that the attacker had entered the room voluntarily. Someone Laura knows well. Now, the emphasis was on figuring out Bryce's true motivation and the actual events of that night in the honeymoon suite. Police started learning shocking facts about Bryce McGregor's life as the inquiry progressed, shocking everyone who knew him, including Laura's family. Laura had never realized Bryce's secret double life, which was far from the affectionate, faithful spouse he seemed to be. Bryce had been having affairs with at least a dozen men, according to investigators, many of whom he met through gay hookup apps and other online forums dedicated to anonymous sex. Bryce had serious relationships. He had developed close, long-term connections with a number of men, frequently meeting them for brief intercourse at rest areas along the Pacific Northwest highways. These isolated areas served as the ideal backdrop for his clandestine way of life, away from his wife, family, and friends' prying eyes. Shane Riley, Laura's cousin and the best man at their wedding, was one of his closest lovers. The betrayal was even more terrible when it came to light because Bryce and Shane had been having an affair for more than a year. Bryce had made every effort to keep Laura in the dark about his secret life. He took great care to clear his internet history and remove communications from his phone. He always made sure his double life remained hidden by using reasons like work vacations or late business meetings when he met his loves. Bryce kept up a picture-perfect social media persona as a contented husband, sharing pictures from their wedding and honeymoon while secretly having these relationships. An important turning point in the research was learning about Bryce's secret life. His digital footprint was examined by police, who discovered innumerable emails, messages, and social media exchanges that exposed the full scope of his covert affairs. Additionally, they spoke with a number of the guys Bryce had dated, who attested to the specifics of their interactions. Many of which were held in remote areas, such as the rest areas along Interstate 5. These gatherings, which were frequently scheduled at night, were a part of the meticulously constructed fiction that Bryce had been spreading for years. There was a significant split between Bryce and Laura's family after it was revealed that he had an affair, specifically with Shane. They were appalled to discover that Bryce's secret lover had also been the man who had stood with him at the altar. Police started to wonder if Bryce's secret existence had something to do with Laura's death as these facts became known. It was now evident that Bryce had been under a great deal of stress, both from the expectations of marriage and the worry that his secret would eventually be revealed. Police soon realized something was wrong when they turned their attention to Shane Riley, Laura's cousin and Bryce's best man. Shane strongly denied being gay when asked about his relationship with Bryce. Presenting himself as a devoted cousin and close friend of the couple, he maintained that there had never been any romantic or sexual contact between him and Bryce. However, Shane's assertions were previously refuted by evidence that investigators had already found. Shane was raised in an extremely conservative and devout family. Coming out as gay was not an option for him because of his upbringing in a conservative religious society. For Shane, keeping up the appearance of being straight was crucial to keeping his family and his position in their community intact. His personal life might have suffered greatly if there had been any indication that he was involved in a same-sex relationship. The detectives were not surprised by his denial, nor by the pressure he faced to conceal his sexual orientation. However, Shane was unable to deny the evidence that the police had. Investigators discovered graphically detailed pictures of Shane and Bryce together, showing them having an affair. Unquestionably, these photos, which were taken from Bryce's phone and internet accounts, demonstrated that the two had been together for a considerable amount of time. Shane's cool attitude faltered, his composure crumbled, and the weight of his falsehood started to show when he was shown the pictures. His nervousness was evident, even though he continued to deny being gay in the official record. Although Rice had taken great effort to hide his secret life from Laura, his friendship with Shane was not as well kept. Even while Bryce was getting ready to marry Laura, the two guys had been together for more than a year. Bryce took to considerable measures to conceal their affair, which was an important aspect of his secret life. Even though Bryce took care to conceal the evidence, secretly seeing Shane and erasing communications that may be used against him, the truth finally came to light. It was more than just a humiliation for Shane to have his relationship with Bryce exposed. It signaled a sea change in the inquiry, posing significant queries regarding the extent of his involvement in Laura's murder. Shane swiftly rose to the top of the list of important suspects in the case as investigators started to question whether his desperate attempts to keep his secret had led him to act in such a way. Critical test findings that police got as part of the ongoing investigation into Laura McGregor's murder gave them a more bleak picture of the couple's existence before she died. Laura had received standard medical testing just days prior to her horrible murder, which would turn out to be a sad turning point in the investigation. Laura was in the early stages of pregnancy, according to the results. What ought to have been a happy discovery swiftly turned tragic. In addition to learning that she was pregnant, the tests showed that Laura had tested positive for a number of STDs, including chlamydia, herpes, and HIV. These disclosures gave the inquiry a surprising new dimension. At first, investigators thought Laura and Bryce's tense relationship was just like any other newlywed couple. However, everything changed when the STDs were discovered. According to investigators, Laura was exposed during the investigation into Bryce's multiple covert encounters with other men, which is how she got the infections. In addition to being evidence of Bryce's treachery, the STDs also demonstrated how seriously his double life had put Laura in jeopardy without her knowing. Laura had long been unaware of Bryce's promiscuous behavior, which frequently occurred at rest stations along the highway in Oregon or during indiscreet anonymous sex that he planned online. Investigators concluded that these extramarital affairs demonstrated Bryce's reckless disregard for his wife's health and well-being in addition to his covert sexual exploration. He must have been troubled by the possibility that he had infected his gullible wife. However, Bryce never acknowledged any blame or guilt. In addition, the pregnancy itself brought up more concerns over Bryce's possible intentions. According to police speculation, Bryce, who was already fighting to hide his secret existence, may have perceived Laura's pregnancy as the last obstacle to his release. Being a father would have bound him to a life he didn't want, one that was full of attention and responsibility, things he had deliberately avoided throughout his covert sex. Investigators questioned whether the burden had driven Bryce to a breaking point because it probably felt impossible to raise a child while keeping his relationships with others hidden. Laura's pregnancy and the revelation of the sexually transmitted diseases might have been the last straws for the terrible events that transpired, as Bryce's meticulously planned existence was collapsing under the weight of his lies. Investigators now viewed Bryce as someone who may have been desperate enough to kill to protect his covert existence, rather than just as a man caught in a web of deception. A sad finding that had a significant influence on the case and individuals involved was made as the investigation into Laura McGregor's death progressed. Police discovered that Laura's medical tests in the days preceding her death had been performed by her own father, Dr. Henry Riley. Dr. Riley, a well-known doctor at a nearby clinic in Eugene, Oregon, had processed the standard tests without any immediate suspicion, but he was shocked by the findings. His cherished daughter had several sexually transmitted infections, such as chlamydia, herpes, and HIV, in addition to being pregnant. Dr. Riley was deeply affected by the realization. The news broke my heart as a father. He had to confront the agonizing truth that Laura had been tricked in the most heinous manner, while his daughter had been thrilled about her future with Bryce. Finding out she was pregnant ought to have been a happy occasion. However, the evidence of treachery and danger in her marriage eclipsed everything. Dr. Riley was devastated and confronted Bryce in private on the test findings. Knowing about the pregnancy and the sexually transmitted diseases, Dr. Riley was convinced that Bryce had cheated on his wife and endangered his daughter's life. He pressed Bryce to be open about his affairs and acknowledge his secret life. Dr. Riley couldn't remain silent because he was furious that his son-in-law had put Laura through such cruelty and treachery. Dr. Riley threatened to reveal Bryce's secret if he didn't confess the truth during their heated exchange. He couldn't watch the guy who had jeopardized his daughter's health continue to live a lie as a doctor and, more significantly, as a father. Bryce found himself in a tight spot. His carefully concealed double existence was now coming apart in front of him. There was increasing pressure from every direction. Rice was aware of drive. Riley's whole life might fall apart if he carried out his threat. The public, his friends, and his family would all be aware of his covert relationships with men, including his best man and friendship with Laura's own cousin. Later, this encounter would be viewed as a turning point in the terrible chain of events that ultimately resulted in Laura's death. In addition to adding to the case's emotional toll, Dr. Riley's revelation strengthened the theory that Bryce may have used violence as a last resort to conceal his secrets. Bryce's world started to fall apart even more as the Laura McGregor death probe went on. Additional evidence discovered by the police suggested a perilous mix of desperation, secrets, and falsehoods. Investigators examined Bryce's actions in the days preceding Laura's murder in an effort to determine what would have motivated him to carry out such a heinous deed. Investigators discovered that Bryce had been leading a double life for years as they pieced together the timeline. He was gradually revealing his covert associations with guys, of which Laura had known nothing. Additionally, police hypothesized that Bryce had reached a breaking point in his anxiety of being discovered. The strain Bryce was under was only increased by Laura's pregnancy. He was living a false life, having affairs with several guys while seeming to be a devoted husband. The fact that Laura's father, Dr. Henry Riley, had lately learned that Laura had gotten many STDs, most likely as a result of Bryce's extramarital activities, was what really caught detectives off guard. Her medical records revealed that she had chlamydia, herpes, and HIV. At first, the news of her pregnancy had been a pleasant surprise. However, it was now evident that Bryce had put Laura's health and the life of their unborn child in jeopardy. Dr. Riley had challenged Bryce about these test results a few days prior to Laura's death, so he was well aware of them. Investigators think that Bryce may have lost it after this confrontation. Bryce might have felt trapped because his father-in-law was threatening to reveal his secret life and pressure him to come clean. He had been concealing his name for years, having affairs in private places like rest areas along the route and online through anonymous contacts. Bryce may lose everything if Laura discovered his other life. As further evidence accumulated, investigators hypothesized that Bryce may have seen Laura as the final barrier in his path because he was in a panic and afraid of being discovered. The strain was increased by her pregnancy, her father's awareness, and the possibility of humiliation in public. Investigators started to speculate that Bryce believed that the only option was to use violence in the hopes of protecting his secrets by keeping Laura silent. Police eventually detained Bryce McGregor in relation to the death of his wife, Laura, following months of inquiry. His home was the scene of the arrest early in the morning. Bryce was still asleep when local police officers carried out the arrest warrant. Upon entering the house, they were greeted by a serene setting that stood in sharp contrast to the turmoil of the months preceding Laura's untimely demise. Police announced Bryce's charges at a press conference following his arrest. They explained in detail how the evidence suggested that he had the chance and the motivation to conduct the crime. The lead investigator made it clear that they thought Bryce killed Laura in order to keep control of his clandestine way of life. The town was rocked by the arrests, and many people had to face the fact that an apparently regular couple was hiding such sinister secrets. Detectives questioned Bryce after he was taken into custody. He first made an effort to deny any wrongdoing, but the growing evidence against him made this impossible. The police had been getting ready for this. And they were determined to make sure Laura and her bereaved family would receive justice. The start of Bryce McGregor's trial in January 2013 garnered media attention due to its startling disclosures of violence, lying, and treachery. Previously regarded as a loving spouse, Bryce was now charged with first-degree murder for the violent death of his wife, Laura. As the case progressed and the unsettling elements that had contributed to Laura's untimely death were made public, the courtroom was crowded with interested bystanders and members of the media. The prosecution's team, headed by Assistant District Attorney Sarah Vissel-Rowley and District Attorney Delaney Bristol-Smith, had put in countless hours to develop a compelling case against Bryce. They successfully emphasized the proof of his secret life as well as the reasons for his behavior. The jury was persuaded that Bryce killed Laura in order to conceal his illicit affairs, out of fear and desperation. A major factor in the prosecution's victory was their comprehensive presentation, which included the medical records proving Laura's pregnancy and her STD diagnoses. Conversely, Bryce's defense team, headed by lawyer Frisch C. Reynolds, tried to claim that Laura's death was caused by an enigmatic intruder rather than her husband's activities. But the absence of proof for Bryce's account of what happened weakened the defense's arguments. The jury realized more and more during the trial that Bryce had planned a cover-up for his activities. The evidence was incriminating against Bryce. The main focus was Laura's medical records, which included information about her pregnancy and the STIs. It turned out that Dr. Henry Riley, Laura's father, had performed the tests and learned the heartbreaking reality about his daughter's condition. Bryce's life started to fall apart when Dr. Riley confronted him about the findings. The confrontation, according to the prosecution, set the stage for Bryce's violent outburst a few days later. Bryce's defense team tried to shift the blame as the trial went on, arguing that an unidentified intruder was responsible for Laura's death. But when Bryce told the cops a strange narrative about a drug dealer named Jake, it turned out to be untrue. The physical evidence clearly identified Bryce as the offender, and there was no evidence to back up Bryce's assertions of an outside attack. The court met again for sentencing after the guilty judgment. In her direct statement to Bryce, the court emphasized the deliberate nature of his offense and the significant effect it had on Laura's friends and family. The judge's decision, which reverberated throughout the courtroom, finally condemned Bryce to 30 years to life in jail. Although no punishment could ever replace their cherished daughter, Laura's parents were grateful with the decision and took comfort in the knowledge that Bryce would be held accountable for his acts. Shane, Henry, and Bryce McGregor all had rather different outcomes following the high-profile trial. Bryce was convicted of killing Laura, his wife. Bryce found it difficult to adjust to life behind bars while he was incarcerated. He reportedly turned into a bit of a loner and frequently avoided interacting with other prisoners. But in an unexpected development, he became close to a fellow prisoner who was incarcerated on drug-related charges. Their subsequent marriage drew criticism but also brought to light the difficulties of prison life. Despite having a history of substance misuse, Bryce's new partner seemed to give him a sense of community in a place where loneliness can be debilitating. Closely examine Bryce's case. Many thought that following the turbulent circumstances surrounding Laura's death, he wanted stability, even in an unstable situation. Shane, Bryce's best man who was later exposed as a participant in the conspiracy surrounding Laura's murder, chose a different path. Shane came out as gay after experiencing a great deal of internal strife and first denied his sexuality. A few years after the trial, he got married and had a family. They became parents to 2 children together. Many found inspiration in Shane's transition from a reclusive man struggling with his identity to an outspoken homosexual spouse and parent. The sinister mysteries of his past stood in sharp contrast to his current life. Laura's father, Henry, was heartbroken by his daughter's passing. He committed himself to educating people about domestic abuse and the perils of lying in relationships after the trial. He frequently gave speeches at community gatherings, using Laura's tale to illustrate to people the warning signals of abusive relationships and the significance of being mindful of potential threats. Henry worked to support families impacted by similar circumstances and stop catastrophes in the future. Bryce, Shane, and Henry's stories serve as a reminder of how intricately entwined people's lives may become, particularly after a tragedy. Henry put out great effort to preserve his daughter's memory, Shane welcomed a new chapter full of love, and Bryce stayed imprisoned. Their experiences serve as examples of the intricacies of life and the enduring effects of decisions made under dire circumstances. Laura McGregor's murder was a tragic story of deceit, treachery, and a hidden life that came to an end in the most terrible way. It acts as a sobering reminder of how lies can be destroyed by profoundly concealed truths. We appreciate your interest in this True Crime Expert episode. Watch this space for additional tales that explore the most obscure aspects of human nature.